Hey folks, Nathan here. Please forgive my crappy voice right now. Sinuses and stuff are hitting me pretty badly here. But I want to show you something that just arrived that I didn't actually know existed. I knew there was a wooden version of a Dejarik game out there that you could get through Galaxy's Edge. But I found this on the Disney Store website. As you know, I do a lot of Star Wars home video stuff. I collect tons of it, which means I had a ton of Disney Movie Insider points when they decided to end that program. So I dumped some of them into Disney Store gift cards. But I don't usually use the Disney Store. So I was looking around to see what I might pick up, and thanks to an advertisement that popped up, I saw this. A nice blending of my love of board games and Star Wars into one. This is an electronic Dejarik board, which is really kind of interesting to me. It's part of the Galactic Archive Series. Dejarik, electronic board game. It has different languages here. It's 3 different languages, with English just being one of them, of course. Star Wars 8+, and an image there of the game itself. It's got a shot from the film up there, and that logo again, and then at the top, the English part at least says, "In a unique partnership with Lucasfilm, the Star Wars Galactic Archive Series is an exclusive line bringing collector-focused items from the Lucasfilm archives to life, with screen-accurate premium details and enhanced playable features." Dejarik. Commonly played on starships and homes throughout the galaxy, from well before the time of the Clone Wars and long through the era of the Empire, Dejarik was a great way to pass the time on long hyperspace trips. The game pieces in Dejarik were creatures both real and mythological, and a successful move would result in one monster decisively beating another in combat. And it notes here that it includes 8 game pieces in the game board with light and sound effects, and then a little bit about the actual physical features of the thing here. And I will say, this, having looked at the rules for the actual wooden version from Galaxy's Edge, this is a more complex version of Dejarik than what those who got the wooden one from Galaxy's Edge are able to play with. Although you could certainly modify that to use the rules from this. I'm not going to go through a whole playthrough or anything here, but I do want to show you a bit about how this plays and what is included. So here is the Dejarik electronic board here. It has all your spaces there. It has that impassable circle in the center, in this case completely of the silver color. Each side has a set of 13 lights, 5 operational buttons, and then a bunch of things that sort of look like they should be buttons here, but they're not really buttons. They're just decorative there. Again, same thing on the other side there in red. And it does use AA batteries if you don't want to plug it in. But you can actually plug it into USB in order to use electrical power instead of batteries. In that case, there's a battery port, there's a speaker, and then there's where you would plug it into USB. I would note, though, if you do use batteries, it is a bit of a battery hog because it does use 7 AA batteries. Fortunately, it comes with some. Pull out the little plastic tab and you're ready to start playing with the batteries that are included. But if you do want to use USB, it does come with your USB cable, but it does not come with anything to plug this into an outlet. Now, it does come with a rulebook here. I will say the rulebook is absolute garbage. It is one of the worst rulebooks I have ever seen for a board game. It is not terribly clear. It introduces concepts well after they should be introduced to make sense of other stuff earlier in the rulebook. You got to read it a couple times to get it, and there's still stuff that it basically leaves out. Ironically, it even has a picture on the cover that is an illegal placement because you can't have a piece in the center, and yet there it is on the rulebook. Just not a well-done rulebook at all. On the other hand, it does have some decent reference cards here that you can use. They are in all 3 languages. The English one is just black on the other side. The other one has 2 languages on either side. And yes, the different characters, creatures are divided into blue and red teams of 4 pieces each. So there's one reference for each team, although what they do is effectively the same. It's just that the type of creature for each type of piece is different for each side, which is a nice touch. Now, each team, red and blue, has 4 pieces. They all have different names for their classes, which determine things like how they move, how they attack. But there are also portions of the rules that refer to the need to respawn by spending points and things like that. And in that case, it's divided up just into 2 types, brutes and pawns. Brutes are also the name of a type And they never really specify anything beyond that you have 2 brutes and 2 pawns without ever actually telling you which pieces are which. So presumably, the 2 top classes, so to speak, those are your brutes. The 2 bottom classes are your pawns. So for your brutes, the first type of brute, which is actually a class called brute, the red team here has your Kintan Strider. The blue team has a Mantelian Savrip. Then for your second brute, in terms of costs, but for the class known as the Predator, the red team has the Ngok, NG'-OK, and then the blue team has the Kalor Slug. Then for the 2 sort of lesser classes, the pawns, again, presumably because the rules suck, you have the Guardian type that starts here with Monarch. Then the blue team has Molitor. Then for the Scout class, which is the last type of pawn, we have the Hojuks for red, and GHHK for blue. On the base of each of them, if you turn it over, you're going to see a symbol in a window that can also change as you rotate it. So this indicates an aggressive creature. This indicates a guarded creature. And in this version of the game, the results of an attack aren't just automatic, like in, say, chess, where if you go to the spot, the other piece is gone. Here, the results of an attack are not just about, who can reach whom. The results of an attack are also going to come down to what was the mode of the attacker and what was the mode of the defender and how do they compare. So one enormous oversight in the rulebook is that they're really bad at explaining how you're supposed to set up the pieces in the first place. So there's an outer ring, there's an inner ring, and there's this central circular area. The center circle, no one can enter into, no one can pass through it. So you might as well ignore that. It's outer ring, inner ring for all gameplay purposes. All it says is that the brute class must be positioned in the inner circle. And it says that both sides will effectively be facing each other from their sides of the board. But nothing about actual placement as the wooden version of the game requires. So what I've set up here is an example of what may be a starting space. Even in the rulebook, they give you where it says starting positions here, a little diagram, except the diagram makes no sense with what it's saying because it's got some of the brutes not where they're supposed to be. But there's nothing in there like with the wooden version that has them clumped together to start with. It's just brutes on the inner ring, everybody else on their side facing the other side. So what I've done in this case is I've made them actually looking at their counterparts. I do not believe that is necessary. I really believe you can put your brutes just somewhere on the inner circle and anyone else anywhere on your side, but the rules are not at all clear. They're extremely clear, though, on how you decide who's going to go first. The youngest player basically picks up one of these, turns it to either guarded or aggressive, and then the other player has to basically guess. What did they set it on? And if the older player guesses correctly, they get to decide who goes first. If they don't, the younger player decides who goes first. Kind of a convoluted system, but way more detailed than most of the other rules in this rulebook. I would also note that nowhere in here does it say what mode each piece actually starts in at the beginning of the game. It refers to all of them always respawning naturally without you paying extra points as aggressive. So I would assume that means they're supposed to start aggressive, because that's effectively when they first spawn. But it doesn't say. So I've turned the lights down here to show you kind of the cool visual effect that this thing has. There are, again, 5 buttons on either side. You have 2 that are kind of together on the far right end of that track, 3 that are together on the left end, and then you have your 13 colored dots on either side. The left-hand button from the set of 3 turns it on. Now, this is what makes it pretty cool. I'm going to turn the light completely off. Check it out. Tilt it up a little bit. That's pretty cool. The points that you can spend are represented by these blue and red tracks on either side, which light up. And then all of the pieces, as you put them down, as you even get them close, light up. So they kind of look almost holographic when you look at them sort of from the side here, because they are that see-through plastic. They don't look fully holographic, but it is a pretty cool look. You have a button here, the left one of the right-hand pair, that just deals with sound effects, turning them on or off. There's a button here that actually changes whose turn it is, gives a little sound effect and changes the turn, which is kind of weird, honestly, because basically all this glorified thing is doing is it's making the characters look cool because it's lighting them up, and it's keeping track of how many points you're spending, but that's it. It's not like it's moving pieces around for you or tracking where your pieces are, but you still have to actually confirm the end of your turn, and when it's not your turn, you can't spend your points. It locks out those controls. Pretty elaborate for something that is a glorified point tracker. So right now it is Blue's turn, for example, and the other two on the left-hand set are what are going to increase or decrease the amount of points that you have. So if you're going to spend points, for example, to perhaps respawn a mini, you click, 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 or perhaps you could see it better on the other side, but wait, yeah, they're locked out, right? Because it's not Red's turn. If I want to end the turn, I have to click end turn. Now, Red can spend their points, as you can see here, to do stuff. But then they have to end their turn. And now Blue can do it again. And so on. So the idea of the game is that you want to take out all the pieces on the other side. That is your goal. Wipe out all 4 creatures on the other side. But unlike in the wooden version, where once an enemy is defeated, that creature is just gone, that's not the case here. That's what these points are for. If you want to respawn one of your pawns, so to speak, if I'm dividing these up correctly based on how horribly written the rulebook is, that would mean your guardian or your scout. Then if you want to respawn them in aggressive mode, you spend 1 point. If you want to respawn them in guarded mode, you spend 2 points. Now, that would be a dead giveaway to your opponent what way you're respawning. More accurately, conceptually, is that you are spending 1 point to respawn as an aggressive piece. But you can spend another point to give you the option of changing them to guarded when they respawn. You have to announce that you are spending that extra point and which piece you are spending the point on. You don't actually have to change it to guarded, though. So in theory, you could spend a point to change it to guarded or spend it to bluff. But again, for a pawn, it is effectively 1 point to respawn aggressively and 2 to respawn either aggressively while bluffing or guarded. And you can do the same thing for your brutes, which would be your brute or your predator, but in that case it costs 2 points for a regular aggressive respawn, and 3 if you want that option to either bluff and make it look like you're doing guarded or to actually do it as guarded. You can also change the attack mode, at least the way the rules look, by spending 1 point at any time during your turn to switch the mode of a single piece. And on your turn, you'll be doing 2 things: moving and attacking. And unlike chess, moving and attacking don't follow the same patterns for an individual piece. Each piece has its own attack pattern and its own move pattern, which are not necessarily the same thing. And interestingly, the way this plays out, at least in this version of it, if you have the choice to move or attack, and attacking is an option, you are required to do the attack. You cannot choose to move if there is an attack that is available, unless you spend 1 point to forego the attack and move instead. So you can only really move if there's not an attack available. And if you attack, and where you end up on that enemy space, having taken them out, puts you in a position to attack another enemy piece, you are required to immediately chain that attack and do another attack. Now, before we look at the moves of the individual pieces to wrap this up, let's take a look here at how attacks work and the actual attack resolution. Right now, we have both of these figures on aggressive. And I would note there is a special rule with the brutes where basically if a piece hasn't moved out of its starting position, you can't actually attack it yet, but as soon as it does, it's fair game. But again, we'll deal with that when we look at the individual pieces. But let's assume they've moved out of their starting positions. They are there ready to attack. So let's say that blue is our attacker. That makes this guy, red, the defender. They can attack, in this particular piece's case, one space in either direction, and that includes diagonal. So let's say he's going to attack here, right? He's going to attack this dude. Because they are both in aggressive mode, when an aggressive attacks an aggressive, the attacker wins, the defender loses. So with aggressive, he gets the spot, this piece is gone. But let's assume instead that he's on guarded. So we have aggressive, guarded. If an aggressive attacks a guarded, the guarded wins. Let's assume it's the other way around. It's his turn, he's attacking, so it's a guarded attacking an aggressive. If a guarded attacks an aggressive, the aggressive wins. So he's gone. But now let's say that they are both guarded. If they're both guarded and an attack happens, both pieces remain on the board. Neither of them dies, but they both have to switch to aggressive. So you can see how this is somewhat of a defensive kind of mind game here, because there's really only one option that's going to leave the attacker as the one that's alive and the defender as the one that's dead. And that is for both to be aggressive. But again, throughout the game, pieces are being lost, and you win by removing all the ones for the opponent, but you can spend these points, which, by the way, you can never get back. You can spend points to respawn. So the game goes on longer than just capturing 4 pieces. It could have a lot of pieces captured along the way. However, what's interesting is, let's say that blue team has all been defeated except for this poor guy here. And let's get it down. Maybe it's 3-on-1. Perhaps. While a player is on their last piece, they only get 3 turns to win, or they lose. That way you can't just do a movement game where you just keep staying out of range and moving around. It just goes on as a draw indefinitely. But of course, if you still have points, you could do some respawns and get yourself out of that situation. And if your lone creature manages to take out a piece from the other side, that counter of 3 turns resets. So if you're down to 1 and you're out of points, you really have to play aggressively or you're going to lose. But if you can keep taking out the opponent's pieces little by little, even if you just have 1 piece, you can keep resetting that 3-turn clock. Now let's talk about movement and attack patterns for the 4 different types of pieces. So the brute class, like our Mantelian Savrip here, actually has an attack pattern and a movement pattern that are almost identical. They can move 1 space in any direction, including diagonal. That is also how they can attack. But again, this particular piece can't attack a piece that is still on its starting space. What's interesting about the brute, though, is let's say the brute is here. If the brute is on this outer ring, the brute can move backward, off of the ring, and reappear looped around to the other side. So it's slow, and it has limited range, but it does have the ability to reposition a little more easily by leaping sides of the board. Though again, you can only move if there isn't an attack available to you, or you spend that 1 point to forego the attack and allow yourself to move. Then your predator, like the Kalor slug here, can move, when moving forward or backwards, 1 space. There is no looping around, so they can do this. When moving left or right, they move 2. And it's not they move 1 or 2, it's they move 2. And they can, if there's a piece in the way, they can leapfrog over them, and there appears to be no limit on being able to leap over pieces from the other side. So 2 horizontal with the ability to leap over other pieces, or 1 forward or backward. And then a predator attacks basically like a knight in chess. So 2 and then 1, an L-shaped move. So they can attack here or could attack here. So, girl, you in danger. And again, remember that you are required to chain your attacks. So as an example here, we go boom, boom, boom. Has to attack unless it's going to spend a point to allow itself to move instead. Boom, boom, boom. Takes out this one. Oh, now within range. Boom, boom, boom. Has to continue moving across until it reaches a point where there are no viable attacks. That's the case for all the creatures. Then the Guardian is a bit like kind of the opposite of the Predator to an extent. So it moves like a knight. So it moves in an L shape, 2 and then 1. But its attack is just 2 left or right, not forward or backwards. So essentially it moves the way that a Predator attacks, and it attacks the way a Predator moves, except a Predator has that ability to move forward or backward 1, whereas that is not part of the possible attack pattern for a Guardian. And then your Scout is interesting in that the Scout's movement is 2 in any direction. And it doesn't have to be the same direction. So it could do 1, 2, or 1, 2, or 1, 2, 1, 2, which is effectively moving diagonally, but it's actually done as forward, then left or right, or back, and then left or right. It can only attack forward or backward 1 space, but it can do that before or after it moves. In every other case, it's move or attack, and the attacking is mandatory if there's one available. But here, he's given the ability to move and then attack, or attack and then move. But it is just one or the other. They can't attack, move, and then attack again. You can still only attack once, but you can actually do both attack and move on the same turn. So the light's off here. Let's just do some quick random turns just to kind of see a little bit of how this plays. So I've just put 1 red here, 1 red here, 1 blue, 1 blue. Just kind of randomly place them just to kind of see how we can make some moves here. We have 1 brute, 1 predator, 1 guardian, and 1 scout, though that is not necessarily how the game might play out, but that's how they're set up. They all have different statuses at this point, different modes. So let's say it's blue's turn. They want to move their brute into better position to go after this guy here. There's no one in range to attack, so they're free to move, and they do their special thing where they can leap to the other side of the board. They move 1 space, which jumps him. He's now within attack range of Red's Guardian. He didn't have to spend any points. He ends his turn by clicking the button. Now it's Red's turn. Red is going to move his scout that can attack before or after moving and gets to move 2 in any direction. He's not going to be able to attack here, but he's going to get himself in a good position. So he's going to go 1, 2. Now he's presenting an alternative target to the Savrip, so maybe he can draw him off. Red also recently lost their brute, so they're going to spend 3 points. 2 to bring it back out in general, and then 1 to sort of bluff, because they're going to still put it on aggressive, not guarded, but they want to make the other player think they're coming in as guarded. So they're going to spend 3 points, and they have to put it somewhere on the outer orbit, so they're going to put it right here, so they can come in on the other side of the Savrip, depending on what the Savrip decides to do. And I would note the respawn is something you can only do once per turn. So his turn is done. He clicks his button. It's Blue's turn. Blue is going to attack with their brute, which again can attack 1 space in any direction, including diagonal. They just got to decide if they're going to go after the Guardian or go after the Scout. They're going to go after the Guardian. The feint there didn't work, so they're going to move 1 space here, but now we got to check. So in this case, and you can't really see it here in the dark, we've got a guarded Mantelian Savrip here, a guarded brute, and a guarded Guardian. So now they both switch, but they both get to stay exactly where they are. Let's say that that's all that blue wants to do, so they end their turn. Just to speed things up here, red's turn, they're just going to move. They're going to move their brute, doing the loop around thing again, and end their turn. Now we've got a face-off here. Now the problem for the blue player is that they know now that they are aggressive. They don't know what this brute is. They only know for sure that it just came out and they may have bluffed. They don't know what the scout is. They can't move because they have to take the attack unless they want to spend a point. So instead, he's going to go with the knowledge that these two just clashed both with guarded, which turned them both to aggressive. So knowing that, he can safely move here with his one space attack. It's aggressive versus aggressive. The attacker wins. The Guardian is gone. And so on, and so on, and so on, until the game is over. As we move back to a little bit more brightness, and back to full brightness, and turn it off. So obviously you can see this is a game that you could play without ever having to have any batteries in this thing at all. You can just keep track of your 13 points in some other way and whose turn it is without having to flip a button. It's just something that's made a little more enhanced visually with the lights and sounds and even having lights on the actual pieces here. I definitely wouldn't call this an electronic game in the sense that it requires the electronics to play the game. It's more just an enhanced table presence. But as horrible as that rulebook is at explaining stuff, I must say, I think I kind of like this version of the game more than the wooden version that I've seen played but do not own, if only because this allows that respawning and has that interesting dynamic of aggressive versus guarded, and those just don't exist, as far as I know, in the wooden version of the game, which is much more, you could say, chess-like. This feels more like it's leaning more away from basic chess into more nightmare chess, which is kind of my jam, or more towards, like, kind of a more of a tabletop strategy game, rather than sort of a classic strategy game, like a more modern, I guess you could say, strategy game rather than a more classical strategy game. Your mileage will certainly vary. I will say that this is on the Disney Store. I was able to get this using the gift cards, like I said, from Disney Movie Insiders. It does run basically $100. That's why I only bought it, because I had those Disney Store gift cards that I was probably not going to use anytime soon on anything. But for those who enjoy tabletop stuff and have always wanted to be able to actually play a game of Dejarik with real rules, not just making stuff up as they go along or modifying things from other games to try to create a hodgepodge homebrew version of Dejarik, this is one of the ways that you can play officially. And with that, I'll wrap this up. Thank you for watching. Again, I apologize for my horrible voice. I just wanted to give you a chance to see this in action now that it has arrived. And remember, no need to let the Wookiee win when there's no Wookiee playing. Other humans are fair game.